All right, everyone, welcome back to an episode of LottieSpaces. Thanks for lending us your ear, lending us your time, and listening to what we have to say. My name is Austin. I am one of the partnership and community managers here at LottieFiles, and I am joined today by Alex on Design. So his real name is Alexander. He's a teacher at Alex on Design and also a UI designer at Web Donut and a self-proclaimed YouTuber and tech geek. So I think this will be a very, very interesting conversation. So the purpose of this session is, of course, to foster a great discussion. We want to exchange ideas in order to help designers to build epic careers. And that is what Alex is going to share today, is his story on how he built an epic career. So the format of the session is just how we do all of them before. We're going to do some introductions and provide some context and background to who Alex is. Then we'll dive into some discussion questions, talk about career, things like that. And then we will close it off with some call to actions, maybe some tips and tricks, and maybe some advice for the next generation of designers as well. So, Alex, I already kind of gave a surface level introduction of who you are, but I would love for you to give your own introduction of who you are. So tell us a little bit about your background, maybe where you grew up, how you grew up, and more importantly, how you think that the way you grew up shaped you into the person that you are today.
First of all, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to tell my story to the younger generation. Hi, everybody. My name is Alex. I'm a UI/UX designer from Serbia. I'm also a content creator and teacher, and I've been doing this for over 15 years now. I'm running a small business called Web Donut, where we actually create and sell templates for UI designers worldwide. Apart from that, I'm also teaching UI design on alexondesign.co, but that's going to change next year. I'm actually kind of in the middle of changing that domain, so you can find me on YouTube, Alex on Design, and then follow up if you are interested there, how the story progresses with the courses and educational content. How I started and why I started with design is I was always fascinated how things are made, how things are being taught through, and why something works the way it does. So naturally, that got me into creativity, that got me into drawing things, first cars and then later people and buildings and stuff like that, because I was always fascinated how things are working. And then later through my career, that got me into UI and UX, trying to understand how, for example, websites are made, why they are made the certain way they are, how mobile apps are made for various different platforms, what is supported, what's not supported, and why is it supported or not supported, how different providers work, for example, and stuff like that. So today I am creating this educational content to help younger generations not be stuck the way I was stuck when I was getting started. So basically, just trying to get back to the community, hence this live stream today.
Awesome. Awesome. That's a perfect introduction. I love it. So I have a question off bat, right? So you said that you were originally fascinated by how things work, and that's how you got into cars and buildings. And then eventually you segued into websites and mobile apps, and of course, like user interface and user experience. So I want to ask, because I feel like there's a lot of people that may be on that journey and they maybe don't necessarily know what they want to do yet. They're looking at design, but it's like, maybe I could do something else. I want to ask you, why do you think that you went the design route instead of maybe like an architect or an engineer or something like that? Was it, maybe you could be more impactful through the internet and through these use cases? Or what was that turning point for you that you were like, okay, I'm going to put everything aside and I'll focus on design?
For me, the main thing was I was fascinated how things work, but I was more drawn to how things look and why they look the way they do. So naturally, that got me into drawing and understanding shading, for example, and let's say how the house was drawn and why it was drawn like that. So that's where my sort of technical interest stopped, and sort of this visual interest prevailed, and that's why I chose design in the first place. Of course, all of this I figure out later. And when it comes to design, why I chose to go into websites and apps, for example, and not things like flyers or social media posts mostly or stuff like that, is just because I'm more drawn to that sort of industry, and I'm more interested into that part of the industry. For the people who are just trying to figure out what they want to do in design, because design is a huge field, especially in today's day and age with the rise of AI, that's just starting to form and it's not fully formed yet, and who knows where this is going to take. My only recommendation for every young designer out there is just to try whatever they can, because you never know what's going to stuck and what you will choose to do for your future. For me, when I started, I was working with logos, I was working with banners, I was working with business cards and infographics and stuff like that, so mostly about print. But then later on, I found out that I was mostly suited to think like a UX designer, because I was interested in user journeys, I was interested in user stories, why people make certain decisions when they buy something or when they create an account with a certain platform and not the other platform. So that part also attracted me, and not just the visuals.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like the way that you said stories, right? Like I feel like people don't necessarily think about why they choose a particular app or why they choose a
Exactly.
particular interface. They're subconsciously like, oh, this is nice because, like on Twitter, for example, when you press the like button, it has a little, little heart explosion or something like that. Or when you order food on a DoorDash or whatever food delivery app you have in the country you're in, is a very nice animated interface that tells that story better than, like you said, when you started off with print, like infographics and banners and logos and things like that. Those are more so static images, and they don't tell as much of a story as maybe like motion and animation design. So I think that's a really good point to touch on there. Um, I want to touch on mentorship because I think that mentorship plays a vital role in a designer's journey. And I want to ask you, did you have any mentors along your journey? Did you have someone to kind of guide you into this zone? Or were you more so a curious person and you just wanted to know more about it and you just found your way into it?
In my time when I started, there were no mentorship platform like ADP List, for example, today, and websites alike. So my journey was sort of through forums and direct contacts with other designers, either in the country or worldwide. When YouTube came about, things started to move in a little bit quicker. So as soon as I remember YouTube including comments below the videos and not just reaction videos as YouTube used to do way before when, that's actually when the community aspect came to YouTube. So you can actually chat with your favorite creators. You can um, basically discuss various different topics in design, how they made something and why they did it. And then all of these independent creators like Howard Pinsky, for example, who started teaching Photoshop on its own. So that wasn't there before. If you wanted to learn Photoshop, for example, you had to follow Adobe's own channel, and there was no other option basically. So people like him eventually started to surface, and then over time everything sort of came to surface. So you can learn Photoshop, you can learn After Effects, you can learn Premiere, you can learn Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch or whatever you want to learn, you can do it. But it took a lot of time. So connections you're building over time are really important, especially with the people you don't really know personally, because you never know how your paths are going to collide later down the line. And this is actually why I'm mentioning Howard, because let's say 10 years after I started following his journey on YouTube through Photoshop courses and tutorials and stuff like that, we were actually in the same team of Adobe XD evangelists. And we actually met there and discussed the how things evolved over time in design. And it was actually really special for me because this person was from YouTube. I never knew who they were, and now I'm sitting talking like I'm talking to you right now. And just it was just amazing to me that these paths sort of collided at the end, and we were actually at the same point of our design journeys. And that's actually where we discussed Lottie to adapt, because Lottie has native integration into Adobe XD, which was amazing. And I actually created a lot of tutorials on my YouTube channel about that as well.
Awesome, awesome. And I think one of the things that I appreciate about your storytelling is that you've had that experience of being able to see not only the internet evolve, but also see design evolve. And I think it's great that you touched on the fact that, you know, especially as it pertains to mentorship, back then, like before YouTube, before all the social media came along, it was very difficult to meet like-minded people. It was very difficult to have the type of conversations that we're having now, that would, you know, get you that design piece that you want, or that would evolve your mindset in terms of how to design things. So I really appreciate you for touching on that. I want to talk about, and this kind of coincides with mentorship, but I want to talk about inspiration, because I could imagine that as you start to meet more people, especially on the time frame that you're talking about, like, you know, 10 years later and things like that, I could imagine that you start to draw inspiration from maybe YouTubers or different people that you meet in person. So I guess, you know, if you could answer two questions for us. Where did you draw inspiration from before this kind of like evolution of the internet came? And now where do you draw inspiration from now that we can hop on, you know, live calls like this?
For before, it's really simple to answer. It's books and magazines and stuff like that. For now, in today's day and age, it's basically from wherever I can. I am working on a daily basis with design systems and complex decisions which impact various different parts of a business, because design system is connected not just for websites or apps, for example, but also for printing, for social media purposes, for presentation purposes, for animation purposes, and stuff like that. So it's a single source of truth for a company which has it. And drawing ideas and inspiration for a design system is really different to, let's say, creating a landing page for a beauty brand.
Yeah.
But just try to find inspiration that works for you. Some people get inspired from Pinterest, other people get inspired from Dribble, some people get inspired from Facebook groups. Just see what works for you. For me, most of the time, I'm inspired by communities. So that being forums, for example, different YouTube channels, different competitions on various different websites like Dribble, for example. So that's what inspires me. But never take inspiration completely for granted. My sort of top tip for designers there is never get inspired by just one piece, because you will end up copying that piece either knowingly or unknowingly, because you were just inspired by that one design. Try to get inspired by various different places, and perhaps when I mentioned Pinterest, you can create a mood board on Pinterest for the style, for example, that you are interested in or maybe you're drawn to. So try to do things like that and not just try to copy one for one what somebody else did, because you will end up creating the same stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think that's great advice because there's so many different places to get inspiration from, and you don't just want to, you know, be narrow-minded. You want to say, okay, I saw something on Pinterest, I saw something on Twitter, I saw something on YouTube. Let me combine all of that along with the things that I already know and create something entirely new. And I think that's some great advice for those listening today. So let's get into the meat and potatoes, right? So you touched on it a bit before, but tell us the story of when you first decided to put motion into your workflow. And then also in that same story, if you can share how you first came across LottieFiles and also what initially drew you to the platform.
So I decided what you mentioned previously with ordering, for example, or liking something, and it always comes back to the user stories and the overall user experience of whatever they are on, either website or a mobile app or a platform or whatever. And that experience is greatly enhanced by giving them some sort of an animation. So some sort of confirmation of they are doing a good job, or you keep them going on the platform if they are on a path, for example, especially learning path. You want to congratulate them, you want to keep them satisfied, you want to keep them engaged, and that way you will reduce the bounce rate of those users. They're not going to leave and close their accounts, but come back and be delighted that they are using your product. So we are going back to the user experience. So you see how these things tie together really nicely. On one side, you have this beautiful animation, but on the other side, you actually have the experience part that animation really nicely ties in, and they are creating this overall user experience on the thing that you're building on. And when it comes to Lottie, back in the days, I was using various different platforms because I started designing websites on Photoshop way, way, way back when, before all of these fancy tools we are using today. And to show some sort of an animation that you had in mind, you had to create GIF files, and then you have to basically put them on top of your Photoshop files in external platforms. There were dedicated websites that did this, and it was extremely complex to even achieve. And then you can just basically hand it over to developers and hope they will understand how to use it, because we didn't have any commenting features, we didn't have any versioning features, we didn't have any exporting features. So they had to figure out how to basically cut that GIF file and export it and upload it to the platform. So it was really complex workaround. And that's when sort of I realized that we need something which is a lot simpler to do. And then with the rise of these new tools like Adobe XD, Sketch, Figma, we got the tool which is a Lottie file, and Lottie really solves that, especially with the Lottie platform these days, because you cannot just reduce the size of the animation you're trying to incorporate, but also you can leave comments between the people in your team, and you can further adjust it, like crop it or maybe change the background colors or stuff like that, and then export it at the lowest possible size, and also leave comments for your developers so they understand how to integrate it, and they get the code which they can just copy and paste into the platform they're building. So really we came to a conclusion to this problem that was there for over a decade, and that's how to deal with designers and developers in a nice sort of file format. And I think Lottie is that file format.
Yeah, yeah, and I would love to hear more about the collaboration piece, because in my mind, right, it seems extremely difficult to work on a project and not be able to comment on it, not have different versions, not be able to share it with your developers or share it with the marketing team, or share it with whoever you need to share it to. So, and you kind of already talked about it, but I would love if you could to talk a little bit more about that importance of collaboration in the context of LottieFiles, right? Because it seems to me before LottieFiles, or before services like LottieFiles, it was extremely difficult to basically get things done. So just talk a little bit more about, what is the importance of that collaboration? Is it like super key, or is it just something that's kind of at the bottom of the list that is a cool add-on for you?
For me, collaboration is everything, because you are removing friction between different teams. You mentioned marketing teams, which will, let's stick to Lottie, for example. If you create a Lottie, you will use it as part of your design on the platform you're designing for. And then developers are going to use it to actually integrate it. And marketing team is perhaps going to use it on a post on Twitter. And let's say it's going to be used in a presentation for, let's say, shareholders, if you're trying to raise capital for your company or whatever. So various different teams are going to use the same asset, which is Lottie in this case. So communication between those teams is crucial. And that's where the commenting and versioning comes into play, and especially easily be able to change colors of backgrounds, for example, because let's say that you have a white background on your platform, but in your presentation you have the black color on your platform. So changing the entire presentation is really time consuming, but this way you can just change the background of your Lottie file. So you have still retained that animation and the storytelling behind it, but you just change the background of the platform, and you can achieve that by simply leaving a comment. So it's really a no-brainer to how important the communication between different teams is today.
Yeah, and I think one major conclusion that I got from that is, you said reducing friction across teams. And I think that's very important, especially when you're dealing with different teams that have different technical expertises, right? Because the developer is not going to have the same expertise as the product marketer, or maybe somebody in C-suite or leadership that just wants to take a look at it, that doesn't know how to code or do all of the little fancy tricks. So I think that's super important. I'm glad that you were able to touch on that. I would love to hear a story about maybe a specific project or a design challenge where LottieFiles, played a pivotal role in achieving that desired outcome. I would love to hear, is there a particular thing that you were like, man, I can't do this, and then you stumbled across LottieFiles, and then like the world was open, or give us some talk there.
For example, I can give you a fresh example on what I'm working on right now, because I'm part of the team. It's called soft.fact. It's a German company, and I'm a product designer there, actually. And they had a problem of explaining really complex psychological concepts to their users. So we used Blender to create 3D animations, and then we used After Effects to export as Lottie files.
Nice.
And then we used those Lottie files in Figma prototypes, which developers were able to easily understand. And we cut the development time from 6 months to just 3 weeks. So it was extremely fast, and it was really beneficial for everybody involved, because not just we reduced not just the production time, but the storytelling was much better because we were using animation. Previously, they were using a bunch of text, and basically, if you're not in that field, like an expert in that field, it's going to be boring for you. But this way, we reduce the text to a minimum, to what's really necessary for users to understand what they are looking at, what they are reading, and try to analyze themselves, because that's what the product is all about. But we also included these animations that help tell the better story for users to understand it better.
Yeah, 6 months to 3 weeks is absolutely insane. Like, I can't imagine the feeling of giving somebody a timeline before and then just shortening that up. And not only is the time of production shorter, the quality is better as well. The storytelling ability is better as well. And I really appreciate you for harping on that there. So I'm very interested in your story, right? Again, because you've seen the internet evolve, you've seen the design space evolve, and you were able to catch on to the different things, and you weren't left behind, because, imagine still using GIFs in 2023, trying to put a GIF on a website, So in this ever evolving field of design, how do you stay up to date and continue to improve your skills? Do you have thought leaders that you follow in the space, that you respect their opinions? Do you follow email newsletters? How are you staying up to date, and how are you able to compete in this ever evolving field of design?
Whatever interests you, just find people who are really good at it and try to follow them, because most likely they are connected with the industry in general, and through their connections they're going to tell you something which is going to end up being true, because they are connected to the industry. And I'm following a lot of different people, not just in UI/UX field, but in the 3D field as well, in the motion field as well, in let's say filmmaking field as well, and especially in AI field. So I'm trying to connect all of the dots design wise, because I'm not really interested how, let's say, AI is going to turn into a tool which is going to be helpful in medicine. That's great, but for my job it's not really beneficial for me to invest my time there. But for a design side of it, I'm extremely interested in it. So to keep it short, follow people who are going to bring you the most value in the field that you're interested in, and you're always going to be up to date with what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So within that same question, how do you determine what technologies, what trends to latch onto versus ones that you don't necessarily need to pay attention to? Because you mentioned 3D, you mentioned motion, you mentioned filmmaking, you mentioned AI, which are all, well, I would say AI is like the most recent technological innovation.
Yeah.
But I could imagine over the last 10 years, there have been a breadth of different technologies that maybe just didn't make it or weren't as applicable. So how do you determine what sticks and what doesn't?
What big companies are using? Because if you follow what a brilliant designer made, but they don't have a background of huge companies backing that idea up, that's probably just going to be a design trend. And design trend and industry trends are really two different things, because everybody can come up with a design trend, something new, something fresh, like gradients, or I don't know, even 3D, even motion. It can be anything. But if it's not backed up by big companies, it's probably not a good idea to invest all of your time into it. Try it, explore it. Maybe you find some ideas which are going to be really useful for your daily work. Maybe bring some fresh ideas to the company you are working for, but don't follow it blindly like it's the only thing that exists. Try to keep your mind open to whatever comes your way and try to basically take whatever you can from everywhere and just follow your sort of path that works for you. But keep an eye open for these trends, but if they are backed up by big companies. For example, if Apple decides to make a change, you can be certain that that change is going to stick for the next 5 to 10 years. But if a designer from, I don't know, Paris builds an app and it looks really cool, it doesn't really mean that everybody in the world are going to follow that style because it looks really cool.
Yeah, yep. And so you mentioned Apple, and when I have these conversations, typically Airbnb is people's first reaction to, what kind of companies they're paying attention to. So I wanted to ask you, well, one, what companies are you specifically paying attention to aside from Apple? And then what emerging industry, not design, what emerging industry trends or technologies do you think are currently shaping the design field? And again, I guess this is kind of the same question. And how should designers adapt to stay relevant with these specific trends that are going on today?
In terms of companies, I have various different companies which interest me and that inspire me over time. For example, mentioned Apple. Google is also one of them. I think whatever Microsoft is doing, it's doing a great job because they are constantly rising in the background. So I always try to understand what they are doing, because since Satya Nadella joined, the company really changed for the better, in my opinion, I think. But I'm not attached to a single company. I try to explore various different companies, and as I said previously, pick whatever I can from each of them and then try to create my own sort of vision of how things should look like. When it comes to emerging technologies, new technologies, I think 3D is really going to be the future with the combination of AR and VR devices. You saw what happened when Apple recently launched their sort of, how do they call it? Apple
The
Vision Pro, I
Yeah,
think, the
the big
goggles and stuff.
yeah.
And just today, I saw that Spline, the 3D tool, launched a dedicated support for that device, which is not even on the market yet for regular people to buy. And it's going to be integrated into the iOS and into the Mac OS natively. So it really gives the indication that things are going to move to the 3D space a lot more. Perhaps not for the complex scenes like, let's say, a video game or a Hollywood movie or stuff like that. But if you can create a sort of simple scene to enhance your user's experience, that sort of knowledge is going to work wonders with you later down the line in your career, especially when you combine it with motion, where Lottie is great. And I already mentioned that, and I'm doing that on a daily basis. So I think that sort of combination is going to be a win-win for everybody later down the line. So motion, 3D, and these emerging technologies like AR and VR.
Wow, so many value bombs right there. And I think a lot of people will get value from what you just said because it's, you know, if you're new in the space or maybe you're not on social media and you're not following a lot of people, it may be hard to figure out, okay, well, what's this next decade going to look like, right? You know, I'm focusing on this particular thing, but as we talked about before, you have to stay competitive in this space, right? If you're using GIFs or if you're using some outdated technology from 2010 and 2023, you're just going to be outcompeted in an open market. And I think the fact that you're touching on specific things, right? 3D, AR, VR, motion, these are things that people can go on YouTube right now and start looking up and start understanding it. So I really appreciate you for giving that insight right there. So we're coming up to the last few questions that I want to ask you, and they're more so about, you know, tips and tricks and advice for the next generation. But the first one that I want to ask is, if you had to create a course, what would that course be about?
About the design thinking,
Mm,
how to think like a designer, and perhaps how to communicate with different teams, especially developers, because you would be surprised if you're just getting started and you just got your first project and you try to explain your design to a developer and they're just looking at you blindly. They don't understand anything. When they try to tell you their side of the story, so more technical side, you don't understand them anything. So a better way to communicate between designers and developers, that's something which I'm really interested for many number of years now, and I gotten pretty good at it because of the communication between different designers and working with different companies and stuff like that. And of course every developer is different, but just understanding how to communicate between these different teams.
yeah, I think that's super important, especially from the conversations that I've had. How to think like a designer is very important because I think, especially if you're just getting started, right? I
Yeah.
think a lot of people focus on the design part. They focus on, oh, well, yeah, let's do some shading here. What happens if I change this color here? And they're so narrow minded because they don't know that you have to know how to communicate across teams. You have to know how to communicate to the developer. You have to know how to communicate to the marketing team because they're all stakeholders in this project that you're building. So I think that's super important. I'm glad that you touched on that there. Um, are you working on anything right now that is getting you very excited? I know you touched on 3D, AR, VR. Are you working on any courses right now? Are you working on any big projects? Or like, what's, you know, when you wake up in the morning, what's like, yes, I get to do this thing. What's that thing for you?
I have uh, I have actually two big projects in the background, but those are sort of personal projects until they are not anymore. So they're not really finished yet, but I'm just working on them in the background. One is the rework of my design system, which is made for Adobe XD. Now I'm making it for Figma, but because Figma has so many possibilities regarding design systems and it's vastly better when it comes to that part of design, it's really complicated to make it work and to make it be dynamic and useful for users. And the other part is creating my new YouTube series called 365 Days of Design, where I'm going to give a challenge every single day to my subscribers and people who watch the videos, and they're going to try to improve their design skills through those challenges. But they're not going to be challenges like you see on Dribble, for example. Let's say, create this awesome looking card. What does the card do? What is the point of the card? Is it going to be useful? Or if it's not useful, then what can you learn from it? Can you integrate it somewhere else? So I'm trying to create something which is already there on the internet and people can find it today, but in a different way. And again, going back to what we just spoke about, try to make people think. If you make this decision, why you made this decision? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? If it's bad, what can you learn from it? And just move on and try to teach people not to get too attached to things, because today things are moving extremely quickly, and the thing that you are attaching yourself to perhaps tomorrow is going to look completely different. So that's maybe one tip that I can give to every young designer out there. Don't invest all of your time into a single solution, into a single design. hoping that it's going to solve everything, because it's not.
Yeah, yeah. So 365 days of design. I will be looking forward to that. I'm sure everyone else listening will be looking forward to it as well.
Yeah.
So this is the last question that I have here. So if you want to take your time and really think about it, feel free to do that. But you've already kind of answered it. So the question is just, what advice do you have for the next generation of designers? But I think you've answered that. So I think the better question to answer would be, what advice do you have for the younger version of yourself? What advice do you have for the younger version of Alex?
Don't be so stubborn. Going back to what I just said, and don't be too attached to your designs, because you invested so much time into this, so many sleepless nights. You invested so much time into learning this stuff, and then finally you have a chance to implement something. Don't be so stubborn. Try to explain your decisions to clients or stakeholders or your teammates or developers in a best way possible, to try to benefit what you are working on and not yourself. Because at the end of the day, you matter in this process the least, because you're not creating something for yourself, you're creating something for your users. So try to understand your users, because you're building stuff for them and not for yourself. So try to remove yourself and your personal goals and beliefs out of the equation. That's when you're going to become a better designer.
Wow. So remove that ego, right? I think that's a
Exactly.
great piece of advice there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And don't be stubborn. I think the term is the sunken cost fallacy, where you've put
Yep.
so much time and effort into something and you just want to make it work. But
Yep.
sometimes you have to step back. You have to take your ego out of it. You have to understand that I'm not building this for myself. As much as I want the color to be this shade of blue, no, it needs to be this shade of blue.
Yeah.
It's like, no, take a step back. This is for somebody else. This is for the user. This is going to be for somebody else's journey. So work on it like that. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great piece of final
That's
advice
why I
there.
love startup mentality, because startups, especially good startups, try to develop an idea as quickly as possible and try to break as many things as possible and just try to get that MVP. If it works, great. Then you continue to add new things and build and add new features and stuff like that. If it doesn't work, just scrap it. Just move on with your life, basically.
Yeah.
So same thing in design.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, we're really just going to wrap up here and just tell people where they can follow up with you. But did you have any other last words for people? Any questions that I may have missed that you want to answer, or anything that you just want to leave with the people?
Yeah. Mac versus PC doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Everything happens in browser. And as we just mentioned, VR and AR are going to take over. So whatever you're using, it's fine as long as it does the job. Don't invest too much time into equipment, too much money into equipment. If it does the job, it does the job. If you're just learning, don't try to buy every single course out there. Try to start from free solutions like YouTube, for example, and then if you find a person or people or organizations who are providing value to you that works for you, for your learning style, then try to invest money there and only there. Because don't try to buy every single solution out there that's not going to make you a better designer. You are. And that's pretty much it.
Drops microphone. Yeah, no, that was great. That was great. So yeah, where can listeners follow up with you? Shout out your YouTube channel and things like that. And also, how can listeners support you? Which is, I think, the more important question.
What you can do is go to YouTube and type Alex on Design. I was a bit lazy over the past few months with my YouTube channel, but there is still a great library of content out there. And there we talk about passive income, we talk about UI/UX design, we talk about these different design journeys. And I also have my courses, and there are going to be links there. But as I mentioned at the start of the show, I'm changing a few things in the background. So I'm not going to give you links here, because by the time you watch this, links are already probably be expired or whatever. So just try to follow on YouTube if you're interested. And leave your questions there. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I like to help people. So I also have a Facebook group which you can access through the YouTube channel, so we can continue the conversation there, and reach out with your questions. Look forward to seeing you there.
Awesome. I love how everything came full circle about how, when you were starting out, you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have people to reach out to, and now you're in the position to where you can tell people to reach out to you. I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome, and a great
Yeah.
way to finish it off as well.
Give back to the community because the community gave back to you when you started.
Awesome. Awesome. Wise words from a wise man. So yeah, that is going to finish up this Lottie Spaces for today. Alex, I really, really have to thank you for coming out,
Thank you.
dropping these value bombs, taking time out of your day to talk to our community. And like we just talked about, coming full circle, giving back to the community. And hopefully somebody will watch your YouTube videos, or when 365 Days of Design comes out, they will get so much value from that they pass that down. And 10 years from now, we could look back and have another conversation. So that's completely awesome. So yeah, for everyone listening, go ahead, follow Alex on Design on YouTube, comment on those videos, like it, subscribe, do everything. Cause like I said, he took time out of his day to give us his story and dive into design and dive into everything he knows. And I really, really appreciate that. So you're probably listening to this on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube or wherever else we post it. But wherever you're listening this to, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like it, because we really appreciate that here. So with that being said, again, my name is Austin. I am one of the partnership and community managers here at LottieFiles, and this has been another amazing Lottie Spaces. Woohoo!